In order to answer this question, we first need to ask ourselves this: what is an accent? Well, an accent is defined as the prominence of a syllable in terms of differential loudness, or of pitch, or of a combination of these. In other words, the different ways people pronounce words. Naturally, variations in speech occur because of physical differences which occur in our mouth, tongue, throat, and teeth. We all have accents in our native form of speech. Have you ever noticed that people from different countries sound similar when they speak English? Well, this is because the speech patterns they use in their own language affect the way they sound when speaking a different language in a way that is very similar. For example, we would say that Ignacio has a Spanish accent, or that Sensei has a Japanese accent, because the way they pronounce their syllables in their own language affects how they speak English. Obviously, nobody is born with the ability to speak. However, we all have the ability to learn languages, and we must learn by listening and imitating how the people in our community speak, thus picking up any accent. The reason we sometimes stereotype accents from certain areas is because the people who have an accent grew up with and are surrounded by the people with the same accent as they do. Each generation has become increasingly surrounded by media influence, which may also play a part in the way we speak. Technically, we all have accents, but it really depends on how you use the word. Typically, we use an accent when referring to a very noticeable difference in speech, but by definition, we all have accents. There are different levels of accents. There's the difference between languages. English and Chinese are very different sounding, and both languages require the speaker to learn a different speaking pattern. There's the difference between British English, Australian English, and United States English. Then we have the difference between Texas and New Jersey. Furthermore, there exist accents even between cities. Lessening or overcoming of an accent is possible, especially in earlier years. It may become increasingly difficult for a speaker to lose their accent as they get older and become more accustomed to using it. It is very uncommon for someone's accent to become less noticeable over time after being surrounded by a community of a different accent. Now back to the original question of where do accents come from? Well, they don't really come from anywhere. They just naturally occur within languages. And if they are widely used, they last for a very long time. And now it's time for a TOK knowledge issue. How widespread does a language variation have to be considered an accent? Personally, living in Wisconsin and coming to Hawaii, I noticed that I say my O's differently, and once I got used to saying them normally, going back to Wisconsin was really strange. For example, we say mom instead of mom. We say okay instead of okay. And we also say granilla instead of granola. Well, maybe that's just me. I think the strangest of all, though, is that we say rough instead of roof. I think that an accent doesn't have to be very widespread or totally absurd and noticeable. Most people wouldn't know how to imitate a Wisconsin accent, but if you really listened, it's noticeable. So, I would define an accent as a noticeable difference between the way people speak, whatever language it may be. Now, a question that I find very interesting is, when did the Americans lose their British accents? And the reason I say British and not English is because the influence of countries Scotland and Northern Ireland played a key factor in the transformation of our accents, and a lot of it has to do with the letter R. Today, an English accent is non-rhotic. This means that the English do not pronounce the R, making words like heart sound like hot. Before and during the American Revolution, however, the English in the colonies and in England were rhotic, meaning that they did pronounce the R. After the American Revolution, rhoticism became very popular in England as a signifier of upper class. Even in the colonies, members of the upper class would show off their status with rhoticism. It started in port cities like Boston, which traded with Britain and spread through the wealthy South. During the industrial era, cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago, heavily populated by rhotic Irish and Scots, remained uninfluenced by the non-rhotic English and wealthy upper class. As industry became more important to the economy and the wealth shifted, non-rhoticism died out and the rhoticism became more common and popular. Today we can see, for example, the non-rhotic Boston accent still exists today, as do many East Coast accents. Here's a video about accents.
This is what I normally sound like. I may have a New Jersey accent on some words, but I think for the most part this is pretty much Middle American. This is mostly New York City accent with the exception of Manhattan. And some people think that most people from New Jersey talk like this too, but that simply ain't true. Because if your home is in South Jersey, then you probably sound like this. I'll have wheat toast with butter. No one hardly gets the Boston accent right. Pardon me, but we're not from New York, people. You know, it really grinds my gears when I hear people trying to do a southern accent. This is one of my favorites. Apparently, when polled, a good portion of people voted the Midwestern accent to sound the most pleasant. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I agree. I'm not sure about this guy, but I'm Navajo, and I think we have the best accent.